understanding, like let's say sort of the micro and the macro of user experience. What is the value? What is, what does it take? What is the process, and so on and so forth. So we'll get started. Before we start, I would love to, like let's say sort of request you that you keep a pen and notebook handy. There will be a lot of takeaways. There will be a lot of note taking that you'll have to do. There will be a lot of resources that will be shared throughout the masterclass. And we will also ask you to do some activities as a part of the masterclass. So I would request you to just like, grab a pen and a notebook as feasible. Next, I wanted to give you an understanding of what the agenda of the call would be like. So the agenda would be majorly, like we'll be covering what you see on your right. We'll be talking about design. We'll then be talking about good design and how does good design lead to good user experience? What is the process of getting, like, let's say, a good user experience out? Then we will detail down into the why, who, what, and how. As you go through this process of asking yourself why, who, what, and how, the results and your tangible ideas that you come up with, I'll give you, like, let's say, meaningful ways to prototype and test your ideas. We'll then walk through a case study, and then we'll have some closing thoughts. So this would be the agenda of our call today. All right, so to understand the X in UX, let's first talk about the X itself. Since all of you, like let's say sort of, most of you are from college, I imagine most of you would have used, power windows in cars, right? It's a very nifty, like let's say sort of tool that has been recently made a standard in cars, where to just, let's say, pull or push the windows up and down. There is a lever, and you can either click it once or click it, like let's sort of hold it, and your windows just move in the direction that you want it to. But previously, when power windows were not a thing, there used to be, like let's say sort of just these levers that you had to rotate either anti-clockwise or clockwise and get it to move up and down, right? Now, the experience of actually rotating the lever versus using the power windows, I'm sure all of you must have, like let's say sort of gone through or understood what a significant upgrade that is. And that experience is something that is felt by you, which is the user, right? So to ensure that we understand what goes, very much like power windows, they have like a whole invisible process going on inside, right? To come up with good user experiences, there is a whole invisible design process that is going on the inside. Good design is usually invisible. If, like, let's say sort of you have to figure out, what is how things work, it is naturally not really good design, right? So let's first, like let's sort of decode in the UX design process. Let's talk about design, right? To understand design, I wanted you to just take a look at this teapot for probably 20-30 seconds. Take a look at it thoroughly, and then we'll like let's sort of proceed. Try to understand the use cases of this teapot. Try to understand how you might leverage it, and then we will ask ourselves a question, whether you will be able to pour yourself a cup of tea from this teapot, yes or no, right? If you can imagine yourself trying to pour a cup of tea, it would be very difficult. And as like let's say sort of some of you are already writing, you won't be able to pour yourself a cup of tea from this teapot, right? Similarly, if you must have, like let's say sort of ever come across this sentence, right? And whenever you're trying to call a company and, they say that your call is important to us, but please enjoy this 40-minute flute solo, right? The experience of going through this is very, very, livid. and it's not really the best of experiences that you can have. So is it good design? Is it design at all in the first place? So at this point, I want to just like take some thoughts to understand, take a minute to understand what is design, right? And is every product or service designed? And is it like, if every product or service is designed, are there things that are not designed? To understand these things, we need a definition of design itself. And there are many good definitions out there. There are many which I may share, and there are, like, let's say sort of also a few of them that I don't completely agree with, or that I'm not satisfied with, whether it's their content or whether it's their form. And sometimes, like, let's say sort of these definitions are filled with, a lot of pronouns, conjunctions, articles, words that are really empty of meanings. But I would love to share a really concise definition of design, and a definition that is, more universal, without an expiry date, and a lot more obvious. And it's beautiful solutions, right? Now, it's an obviousness made of two words, beautiful and solutions. Why beautiful and solutions is because beauty here is understood as the satisfaction that you get from, like, let's say, experiencing something and its usability. We are not talking about decoration here. And solution is, again, why the word solutions? Because the target of any design is to meet the needs when specific situations happen, right? When you are in a particular situation, in a particular context, whether you are in a place, whether you're using a particular device, or whether you're wearing some clothes, or whether, like, let's say sort of you're using certain type of papers, whatever those situations are, you have some needs. Now, some needs may be inner and some needs may be outer. You want to articulate your thoughts and, like, let's say sort of ease out your mind, or you want to give a piece of, like, let's say, examination, and hence you have to write. So the needs may be either inner or outer, but anything that satisfies your need in a particular situation is a solution, right? Now, design does not exist if there is no beauty in it, right? You may call, let's say, those solutions as shaped solutions. They are usable shapes, and they are made with reason, they are made with logic, and they're shaped, but they're not really beautiful, right? We have, whenever we come up with a solution, we've reached those shapes after a process, but that may not be good design, right? It is like painting, and, like, let's say sort of saying that it is art. If Picasso did it, there is no doubt about it. But if we do, probably it will not be art, right? You don't stand up and say that, hey, I want to do art. It's a byproduct of the process, and, like, let's say sort of that is why we do what we do. But why is design essential altogether? And why do we, like, let's say sort of spend the next 60 minutes of our time understanding design and, the value that it brings? So there is an institute, Design Management Institute, that is based out of Cambridge, which maintains an index of companies that are design-centered organizations. Some companies in this particular list are Apple, Coca-Cola, Ford, IBM, Intuit, Nike, and so on and so forth, right? If you look at this over the last 10 years, what this report says is that the DMI design-centric index has outperformed the S&P index by around 220%. What this means is customers value good design companies, and they are always going to outperform the norm, right? So it's very essential for us to understand what makes these companies, the pioneers in their industries, and what do they really do to drive design the way that it should be driven, right? To give you a little bit of understanding of, like, let's say sort of, there are different maturity models of companies. Now, in some companies, design is only limited to development and delivery. where it is focused on, let's say, aesthetics and functionality. But as and when we understand design better, it can be used in an organizational, and it can have organizational as well as strategic value, right? Uh, and you have different levels of design maturity and the different attributes. Now you can place different companies, and for even for a single company, you can try and, like, let's just sort of give them an understanding of, hey, this is where, or this is your design maturity today, right? And how can you, like, let's just sort of take this ahead. But today we'll be talking about development and delivery, because that's where most of our audience that we have with us today will be, that will be the highest takeaway for them. So we'll limit ourselves to talk about aesthetics and functionality, and how do we, like, let's just sort of get that right. And in probably, like, let's say, sort of latest set of masterclasses, we'll talk about how design can have an organization as well as a strategic value. All right. So what is good design? If you've understood what is design, then we need to understand what is good design, and, like, let's sort of how to differentiate it from bad design, right? Because it's a very subjective thing, and how do we, like, let's just sort of make this difference altogether, right? There are 5 items in, like, let's just sort of to understand, or 5 categories to evaluate whether a design is great design or not, right? So what are these categories? First is interactions. Now, any solution that you are going to build, it is designed to be built or to be used, right? Products are made to be used, and they are designed to be easily used, much rather. So, and your solution and your product can facilitate interaction between the product and the people, or it can facilitate interaction amongst people and users themselves, or it can facilitate interaction with the content, right? So today, let's say, for example, you're interacting with content, you're listening to me talk, that is, like, you're hearing, you're making notes, you're, like, let's say, sort of inferring things. That is interaction with content, right? You go on Instagram, you're probably, like, let's say, sort of interacting with a whole lot of people as well as content, right? That is the first checkpoint. The second checkpoint is you are always making decisions on behalf of the user whenever, like, you are building a solution, right? So design is always at the service of the user and the business. And in order to reach good design, we must prioritize simplicity and efficiency that will be taken during its development. Now, why I say that is because if you come across, like, let's say, if you share a solution which is not very efficient to build, or which is not very simple to comprehend or use, it's probably not good design, right? Third category is that it is quite obvious to state that designing is a lovely and a tasty activity, right? Which leads to the user's happiness and pleasure. But ethics go a little beyond, and they, like, your decisions will shape whether the users feel a sense of freedom, they feel a sense of honesty, they feel a sense of progress, or do they feel discriminated and, like, let's say, sort of excluded and alienated. When you are making these decisions, you are trying to run a train, and there is no going neutral on a running train, right? So choose your decisions wisely. Fourth is design art. Yes, undoubtedly. A horrible picture is art, but horrible. A work of great design is art, and it is brilliant art. Design is a creative, emotional, and evocational form of art. What I mean by this is, like, when someone interacts with your design, they can go through an emotional experience, a wave of experiences. And you can which is why it's important to understand that it is art, but it is art and which can be measured clearly, which is the 5th point, right? Apart from being art and being subjective, there are results of design which is measurable, which is number of users, number of sales, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about each one of these different, like the sort of metrics in the rest of the masterclass. Why should good design drive results? Is because satisfaction will drive profitability, right? I mean, you can share a question in the chat, and we'll have a detailed Q&A session at the end of the class. But yeah, thanks for your interest. All right. In Netherlands, what some people have done is they have come up with the concept of glow and dark roads, right? So you don't need street lights there. It is also visioned that there would be glow in the dark snowdrops, for instance, when the temperature reaches a certain level, so that drivers get to know that, hey, probably snow is on the way, right? For now, though, the 500-meter stretch, and I think this is on the N329 highway in OSS, it features only glow-in-the-dark road markings. And these are created using photoluminescent powder that are integrated into the road paint itself, right? And one of the news reporters said, it looks like as if you're driving through a fairy tale. Now, all of this is good design, right? So what are the principles of good design? How do you actually make sure that you are able to craft products that are good design, and how can you be inspired by them, right? There is, according to one of the legendary designers, Dieter Rams, there are 9 principles of good design. Good design is innovative, and I can give you examples of each one of these things to be inspired by. And they can not only, let's say sort of benefit in PM roles, but it can benefit your company. It can benefit your, let's say sort of outlook on life altogether. Good design that is innovative, and an example of that is probably, let's say, Falcon 9 rockets, right? They changed the way people look at rockets altogether. Rockets are no more expensive. They're inexpensive now, not as expensive as we could, say, but definitely a lot more inexpensive than before. Good design is understandable. Today, if you were to, let's sort of take WhatsApp to your 50-year-old, grandparent, and you were to ask them to use WhatsApp, they would naturally be able to do so. Right? It's very understandable. You don't need a user manual along with it. Good design is well thought out. A very good example of this is MacBook Air. When MacBook Air came or was launched for the first time, there were a lot of, let's say sort of backlash for removing the CD drive altogether because it was a standard. But when Apple really empathized with every single user who was actually buying MacBook Airs at that point in time, they understood that the CD drive did not have, let's say sort of a usefulness after a particular time, which is 15 to 20 days in their life cycle, because once they have installed all the software that they need, they don't really use CD drives anymore. So they introduced App Store for, the MacBook instead. Good design is useful. I think all of you must have, let's say sort of already got into the hype train of ChatGPT by now. It can do a lot of things for you. It's very useful. Good design is honest. I'm sure you would have, come across a lot of, let's say, notification copies that are dishonest, or there are many companies which try to sell you some things, and let's say sort of what you get at the end of the purchase is not what they had actually described. So that's dishonest design, right? Good design is environmental. Think of probably edible spoons. They're very environmental in nature. They think about, let's say sort of the end state of products, and they consider the earth as a whole in their design process. Good design is also aesthetic, because whatever is aesthetically pleasing is considered to be a lot more usable. That's a psychological, bias that we have in our heads. Good design is long lasting. It's not meant for, let's say sort of just trendy use. Dieter Rams actually designed a universal shelving system, which was designed, I think, in the 1960s, and it's still distributed and sold today. And if you were to, like probably get one of the shelving systems for yourself, um, you can extend it for as long as you want and keep increasing it as long as you want, right? And good design is minimal because it helps you focus and it helps you, like get the job done without actually dragging attention or eating away into your attention for a long time, right? One key example of this would be the Google search page. As long as, like, the moment you enter the Google search page, the only thing that you do is search. You're not distracted. You're not, like, let's say sort of doing 100 different things there. Sarthak, to answer your question, if it is good design, it will most likely result into profitable design, because design is always, like it is at the service of the business, right? And we'll talk about this like in a little bit. So at this point, I want to just take a pause and I want to understand from each one of you, what, according to you, what is user experience design? Could you give me, like, let's say sort of, could you put what is the definition of user experience design in the chat, please? Easy and accessible is nice. I really love the definitions that are coming along. Yes, ease of reaching the end goal and solving a customer need. Really nice. Functional, delightful, intuitive. Very nice. Practical, user-friendly, aesthetic, tastefully designed, at the same time with minimum user threshold barriers. All right, those are some great, definitions. So, folks, we will try to understand from the inventor of UX what what is the definition of UX, why they coined the term that they did. According to Don Norman, he invented the term because he thought human interface and usability were too narrow, and he wanted to cover all the aspects of a person's experience with the system, and that included industrial design, graphics, the interface, the physical interactions, as well as the manual interactions that you can have with a particular product. This was in 1993. Don Norman was one of the founding designers of Apple, and he laid out one of the principles, or like, let's say sort of, of what designing at Apple would look like. Today, he runs a group called nngroup.com, and he conducts a lot of workshops, as well as written a book called Design of Everyday Things, which is like the Bible of design if you want to get started with. There are other definitions of design. Jesse James Garrett in 2000 tried to articulate what UX is. How can one understand UX well, and this is what they came up with. So on the surface is the visual design, and that is what you probably most likely see. But as you go down the iceberg, you will see that like there are interface design, there is navigational design, how your information is laid out, how you have labeled them. Today on Amazon, if you go and if you look at all the different categories that are out there, that hey, am I going to find something in home furnishing? Am I going to find something in cars? Am I going to find something in electronics? All of those are names and categories that are given by someone, right? So that you can easily find and navigate and like, let's say sort of get to the product that you want. If you go down further, there is, there is scope. What do you want to enable from the product? What do you want to enable from the car, let's say, right? If you're designing a car. And lastly, you have strategy. And so if I had to give you an example of UX as strategy, today, if you were to think of Google App Store, right? Every single let's say, and if you were to use Google Movies, you have to rent every single movie that you want to watch. But on the other hand, Netflix, you buy one subscription that gives you access to all the different movies or TV shows that are there on offer. So it's a strategic call that each of these companies have taken, and they have resulted in very different user experiences. They've resulted in very different set of understanding of what how the user perceives that a particular website and what it has to offer, right? There is another person that I really admire, Dan Saffer. He's written a lot of books designing for interaction, micro interactions, designing gestural interfaces. And this is how he tried to articulate what is the definition of design, what is the definition of user experience design in 2009. If you think about, let's say sort of everything that affects the user's experience, whether that is the architecture, whether that is the information architecture. Today, if you're using, let's say a bed, and the bed has, some really sharp corners versus a bed where, let's say, your corners have been smoothened out and they have been, let's say, you're probably not going to hurt yourself, mistakenly. That's good user experience design, right? Human factors, let's say you were to buy a service where a human comes and let's say they walk you through how they talk about what is it that is an offer, right? They walk you through, okay, how to get onboarded, how to really go about using a particular product. They're not too pushy, they're helpful, you feel nice. You go to a hotel and that's a sort of, you interact with the cook or you interact with the chef. They make you feel comfortable. That's good user experience design. But if they're rude, that's not good user experience design, right? Sound design, just to give you an understanding, back in 2004 and 5, when Symbian phones had come out for the first time, and WhatsApp, let's say, was one of those apps that had come on these Symbian phones, that specifically engineered the notification sound in such a manner that it would trigger some alerts in your brain, and you would pay it way more attention than the default notification sounds that were available on Symbian phones. Right. So if you think about each one of these different aspects, you are somewhere, somehow, always affecting the user experience in one way or the other. Guys, just give me one moment, please. My apologies. All right. So what is, how do we simply put it? It is an optimal balance of user experience design is an optimal balance of usefulness, ease of use, and emotional appeal, right? And or in essence, it's making things simple and delightful to use, which I could see in a lot of the definitions that you guys have shared on chat. So that's it's a sort of great to see. At this point, I would love to just ask you to do a little bit of activity on your notebooks. I want you to take not more than 2 minutes and draw how to make chapati, and probably just share it via the file on Zoom. Can you please do that for me? Yeah. Awesome, Avinash. Can you please share using the file icon on Zoom? All right, Komal's drawing is in, and she shared a circle with us. That's I've tried hard enough, and trust me, I've not been able to make chapati like that till now. But here we are. All right, folks, time's up. Let's get rolling. Let's please send your drawings here. How to make chapati. All right, I think just give me a minute. I'll share my whole screen so that you can see the drawings that are coming in. All right, so this is what Komal had to share with us, how to make chapati. Here is Hitendra's, like on how to make chapati, which is probably, if I'm understanding it right, there is flour, then I have to roll it, and then there is chapati already available, right? All right, guys, can we have like 7-8 more drawings, please? It would be great if we can do that. Wowza. That looks like a lot of steps right here. So you take the flour, then you put it in water, if I understand it correctly, and then you roll it, and then you cook, heat it on a stove, and then you have your chapati. That's great. Gas is missing. That's right. All right. We have one more, which is flour, water, dough, roll, and there you have your chapati. That's great. User manual that we never read. Indeed, right? Like, awesome. So we have flour in a bowl. We have make a dough. We have segregate them into small balls, and we put them in a stove. And like which is sort of here is chapati. All right. I love all the. All right, guys. Thank you so much for like let's just sort of just taking some time and sharing this across. Super fun drawings, indeed. Now, what I want you to observe in most of these drawings is that I didn't really tell you how many steps to draw, right? Someone drew one step, someone drew, like let's say sort of 3 steps. But if you see like at least the next set of drawings that are there, you would see 5 to 7 steps that each one of us, like let's just sort of drew, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Here, if I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Similarly here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what is the takeaway from this exercise is, just give me a moment. I'll just continue sharing. All right. So there were no instructions as to how many number of steps or where to start from and where to, like, let's say sort of end. In most of my, like, let's say sort of workshops, wherever I've conducted this, 80% of the people that have actually drawn these, like, let's say sort of, or submitted these diagrams, they've always been in 5 to 7 steps. And there is a magic number 7 that's like, there is a theory that your mind will only remember up to 7 plus minus 2 things in memory. Some people have gone, like, let's say sort of to 13, 14 steps, starting from agriculture and farm, and, like, let's say sort of getting to the point that it's digested in your stomach. Some people have, like, let's say sort of only taken 1 step. So you see the range of, like, let's say outputs that people have to give. But what is the learning and the key takeaway here is that just by, if we are designing for users, we are designing for people. And as you saw in all of these drawings, we all have some patterns, right? We always, start from a place where you can probably, the floor is the most common place to start, right? Then in most of our heuristics, like there is always, let's say, a roller that is available to make chapati. But some people go to the extent of saying that, hey, like, I don't have a roller, I have a chapati maker at home, so I just put that small ball in the chapati maker and it's done, right? There are the heuristics and there are these mental models. So we need to make use of all of these heuristics, mental models, and patterns to design for humans and for people, because all of us already have one or the other mental model available with us, right? So thank you all for just cordially participating in this activity. Now we will get to the meat of our masterclass today, which is we just got an understanding of what is design, what is good design, and what is user experience design. Now we'll talk about the process in depth, and we'll talk about let's say sort of how can you do good user experience design. All right. In simple terms, whenever you have ideas, you will prototype them and you will make your ideas tangible. Once your ideas are tangible, you will test it with users, you will gather feedback, and you will repeat the process. Right. Sounds simple. That's it. Mostly, to put it very simply, that's it. But what is the process really, right? So let's talk about what is important to get user experience right. Don't just think about the content. Instead, design for the context with the users in it, right? If I gave you, let's say sort of a prompt or a problem statement where I mentioned that, hey, the students are unable to identify birds when they see one. Now your mind can jump to 300 different solutions and think of Google Lens probably, or Google Glass, or AR, a lot of things, right? But what is the context? Can they not identify a bird in books? So can they not read, let's say sort of what is written, or is there a caption missing? Or can they not identify a bird in photo albums? Or can they not identify a bird in a zoo or a park in real life, right? Once the context is available in which the users are interacting with your content, your understanding of the problem and the experience that you're going to build becomes a lot more it becomes a lot more nuanced. So you need to think about not only the content and your users, but the context that they live in, right? Another prompt to just give your brain a run for this is, the learners are unable to recall lessons that are taught in a classroom. But what is the context? When do they need to recall this, right? The when is very important. Do they not recall this while going out with friends? I don't think that's important then, right? They don't recall these lessons while giving examinations. Maybe they didn't prepare well, or maybe it wasn't taught well. And, let's say sort of, that's, you start then trying to get to the root cause of the problem. Or is the context that they are not able to, let's say sort of recall these lessons while performing lab activities? Maybe just they have too much visual stimuli, which is, which is halting their brain from actually recalling something because they're unable to process the number of visual stimuli that is coming into their brain right now. So a lot of it depends on the context, right? So how do we build an understanding of this context? How do we, let's sort of really go through the process in depth? As I said, there are three phases. You have ideas, you prototype them, you make them tangible, you test, and then, you go back to your research mode and you figure out. So what are these steps? These steps, as let's say sort of I highlighted here, are first thing you will do stakeholder interviews, and then you will perform an audit of, how do they go about doing whatever they do right now, how they are solving these problems that they have in their current context. Then you will build user segments and user profiles, and then you'll build user journeys. Then you will try to, let's say create an information architecture where they will find all of this information available. You will wireframe your thoughts, and you'll create them into a much more visual, understandable layout. You will then put them in visual design, and finally, once the visual design is out, your prototype is ready, and you can test this prototype with your users, gather feedback, and you repeat the whole loop again, right? We'll talk about each one of these three things in depth: research, design, and test. So let's talk about research. Research is all about the why, who, what, and how in exactly that order, right? The order is very important, because if you start any other way around, the story is very different. It is very important to start with the why, right? What will the why enable you to do? It will enable you to get the problem statement right. It will help you get the business goals right, and it will help you get the user goals right. So let's talk about each one of these things, right? It is very important to articulate the problem clearly and accurately, right? You must have come across, let's say, this example of two articulations of a similar problem statement, which is a lift, the lift is slow, or people, hate waiting in the lift. Now, if the lift is slow, if that is the problem statement that you have articulated, you will probably spend a lot of engineering efforts into figuring out how to make the lift faster. But if the problem statement that is articulated is the waiting period in the lift seems, makes users anxious, or it's horrible, you'll probably figure out how to make, the experience of waiting a lot more nicer and easier, and where users don't feel anxious. You'll probably add, let's say sort of some jazz music. You'll probably add some mirrors, or you may add some games, some stools, whatever is required to make users feel less anxious. So it's very important to articulate the problem clearly and accurately, because that is what defines the rest of the path that you take forward, right? So let's look at some example of good problem statements and how can you make them better, right? What is a good problem statement? How to eliminate spam messages on a mobile phone. It's a very good problem statement to solve. All of us have, let's say sort of mobile phones today. All of us get a lot of spam, SMSs today, right? Can we eliminate them? I don't think so. So what is a better problem statement in the first place? How to help reduce spam messages for a smartphone user getting at least 10 spams a day. Now you have, let's say sort of built out a niche. You have talked about a kind of users who have access to a smartphone, right? And who is getting at least 10 spams a day. Because let's say if you receive, one spam in 4 to 5 days, it's not really a huge enough problem worth solving. So this is a much better problem statement to solve. It's very, very important to articulate your problem statement well, right? There are some good examples of problem statements that I want to share with you that you can take away and you can try to make them better, right? People find it very inconvenient and expensive to go to a shop to buy books. Now that's a problem statement. You can't say that, I want to improve Flipkart as a problem statement. That is a solution. That is not a problem statement. What is the problem, right? And probably this is the statement that Amazon started out with. There are other examples that I would love to share. It is difficult to coordinate with a courier company when and where an online order should be delivered. It is a good problem statement, but can you make it a better problem statement? Right. People traveling separately for work is bad for the environment. Now, this is a good problem statement, but can you make it better? I want you to think of these problem statements after the masterclass and think about how can you make them really better. Second part of our why is the business goals. And if it doesn't impact the business goals, it might not be the best use of your time right now. Remember, on this planet, in business context and in just like personal lives altogether, time is the most important currency. So how do you make the best use of your time? Right? It's not about good use. The slight shift from good to best use of your time can do you wonders. Right? So we'll talk about heart framework here, and we'll talk about business goals. Whenever you, let's say you're working at a company, or let's say sort of you're interviewing for a company, they will always ask you to optimize a particular metric, whether you are in a design role, whether you're in a PM role, or whether you are let's say sort of a biz dev role, or so on and so forth. Right? It'll likely fall in one of these 5 categories. H for happiness, and it is visible in probably, let's say, app store ratings, percentage referrals, or your customer satisfaction score. Right? E for engagement. Some example of engagement metrics, like let's say if you are a PM at Goodreads, it would be number of books read per week per user. Right? If you were a PM at Uber, the engagement metric could be number of trips booked per month per user. It could also be a very good engagement metric for Airbnb. Right? A stands for adoption, and it talks about how many people have actually adopted what you had hypothesized. So you thought that, let's say Amazon Prime would be a great service, and, have people adopted it. So what percentage of subscribers have Amazon Prime today? Right? That's an adoption metric. And you'd mostly be optimizing for each one of these metrics. What is the percentage of the market share of a particular company? Right? These are some of the business goals that you should keep in mind. Or retention, right? Let's say you're the business owner for Chai Point. Then what percentage of customers who have visited Chai Point every week? If you get 100 visitors one week, but next week, out of those 100, only 50 show up, then the 50 that didn't show up didn't particularly like your experience. So what did they not like about your experience? Finally, we have task success. And it talks about, let's say when you are trying to accomplish a task, you start, but are you successfully able to perform the task? Let's say you started signing up, but the sign up form was so long, the questions were haunting and daunting that only 5% of the people who started the form completed it. Or let's say you are the PM at Airbnb and people start their search, right, for a particular house, but they don't end up booking. All of those are conversion rates, right? That how successfully have you been able to help users get to or do their particular task that they wanted to get done, right? So these are some business metrics that you will keep in mind or you will be working on, and most likely any activity or any job or any task that you do, they will fall under one of these 5 categories. Now, how you can use this framework is across each one of these 5 categories, you will write goals. And you will write the metrics that will help you, let's say sort of measure whether you have successfully met these goals, yes or no. And you will identify what signals do you have from the user behavior that give you an understanding of how this is really working. So to take an example, we have, let's say sort of designed the KYS landing page, right? It's a test for product and product people to understand their strengths and blind spots. Now, when we designed the landing page, we wanted to know whether we have met the business goals, yes or no, right? So how do we go about really measuring the different parts of the landing page? How do we know that the landing page is successful, right? Do the users find the KYS test helpful, fun, and are they convinced to take, like, let's say, sort of sign up for the KYS test? That is a goal of happiness, right? And what are some metrics that you can track to actually find out whether this particular goal is received? That are people referring after taking a test? Are they referring the test to others, right? If they found the content helpful, if, like, let's say, whatever time that they spent on that landing page, what percentage of people came in and they just bounced right off, right? If they came to that page, how many other pages did they view in that particular session? How much time did they spend on that page, right? And after taking the test or after taking the program, how many people actually, like, let's say, sort of took a refund? If that rate is low, then people are happy with whatever we have to share with them. Similarly, engagement, you can talk about, like, let's say, sort of, if they interact with FAQs, if they initiate conversations on our chatbot, if they look at, like, let's say, sort of the sample KYS reports, or they go through testimonials, all of these are different ways to measure engagement on the landing page. Adoption, what percentage of people signed up? What percentage of people started the KYS test? What percentage of people came back to the site to give a test? If the first time they were not able to give a test because probably they were traveling in a train or a bus, or they were just busy, right? That's retention. Task success is how many people started their sign-up journey and they actually completed the sign-up journey. And how many people who finished the test are actually eligible for the program, right? So Janila, to answer your question, all of these are measurable things that once you build all of these paths and flows, you will have this data in your DB in, like, let's say, we'll talk about how to measure this, how to test this at the end of, like, let's say, our masterclass. But what I wanted to share here is the why of your problem, right? It will always be around a particular metric, right? So it's very important to understand what metric are you moving and how does that relate back to the problem statement that you wanted to talk about. At this point, I wanted to go to the next point, which is user goals, right? There are three parts to why: the problem statement, the business goals, and the user goals. Now let's talk about user goals. And just like companies hire people to get a job done, people hire products to get a job done. You don't use a product, you hire a product to get a job done for you, right? So you need to identify the high level job that your users want to accomplish. And then you want to identify the smaller level jobs that get the higher job done. For example, for Facebook, the higher level job is to connect people around the world. That's the higher level job. But what are the smaller level jobs that, like, let's just sort of get it done? That, hey, I can befriend someone, I can chat with them, I can look at their updates, we can talk in groups, we can, like, let's just sort of conduct events, we can exchange whatever we own, we can, all of those are ways to connect. And all of those are smaller jobs that can help the larger job, get completed. So whenever you, like, let's just sort of have the problem statement ready, whenever you have identified business goals, at this point, it is very important for you to come up with a job story or a set of stories, and then investigate what motivation, anxieties, and causes are there for all of these jobs, right? At this time, I want to share a video with you guys, and please let me know if you're able to listen to the video.
Hi, my name's Clay Christensen. I'm a professor at the Harvard.
Are you able to hear?
business school.
All right, great.
I brought with me a set of puzzles, all related to innovation. We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me, please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So they also wanted something that would just go down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday, I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes. You're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast. They crumb all over my clothes. They get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them. And then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty. I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
All right. I hope this job story is somewhat enlightening. When I came across this video, it did change a lot of things. And I wanted to share how you can use these in your frameworks, in your day-to-day exercises. You would come across, like let's say a lot of user stories, and they would be written as XYZ, I want to so that. But what's missing in most of these user stories is the situation or the context, as we rightly, like let's say sort of understood in this particular video as well, right? So let's say if I have to talk about the KYS test, and if I have to talk about the jobs to be done, there are two jobs to be done for two different stakeholders for the KYS test. If I am a student, or if I am like, let's say someone who's looking out for a new role, then when I'm looking out for a new job or a new role, I want to understand my strengths and gaps and upskill so that I can apply for the new role. But on the other hand, for the stakeholder that is within the company, when an eligible new lead completes the test, I want to be notified so that I can start a conversation with them. Now, if you were to, like let's just sort of use it as a user story or write it as a user story, what you would miss out is, I want to understand my strengths and gaps and upskill so that I can, like apply for the role. But you miss the context altogether. You miss the emotion. You miss what is it that they're really looking for? What is the context? What is the situation that they are in? Similarly, on this stakeholder's hand who is running within the company, if you write as a salesperson, I want to be notified when, so that I can start a conversation with the new lead, you're missing out the context of an eligible new lead completing the test, which is very, very, very important, right? So what I want you guys to do is, I want you to take a minute and write a job story for your current project in the chat, in the given format. When, situation, I want to, what is the motivation, so that the outcome can be achieved. Can you please put it in the chat? I think you would have GTVDs for clothing brands as well, Jennifer. Abhishek, that's a user story. You're missing out on the context. The context is, are they looking to buy, or are they looking to browse, or are they looking to, like just gift it to somebody else? What is the situation and what is the context? That's a good one, Rafsal. It's a really good one. Sarthak, that's a good one. You can make it concise, and you can, like let's say sort of, you can try to find the exact context or the situation a little bit better, but that's a great start. Nef, that's a good situation, Janita. They are inspired by a trend, probably looking at some influencer on Instagram, or probably, like it caught their eye, or they just know that a sale is going on. So those are all different contexts and situations to be aware of. And when you design for these situations or contexts, you'd actually get the job done well. All right. I know we are over time, so we'll try to make sure that we cover the rest of the presentation a little bit faster. But we've covered the why. Let's cover the who. It is very important to understand your user profiles and your personas. You should know the user, for they are not you. most, like, let's say sort of PMs and designers, they make this mistake of thinking that the user is themselves. And, like, let's say sort of that is where things go wrong. Okay, that's my bad. Can you see this now? All right, folks. To get started with user personas, it's very important to define a target audience that fits the job context or the story that we just wrote, right? And whenever you are, like, let's say sort of trying to talk to these users, don't talk about the super cool, awesome idea that you have. People will lie to you 100%, right? Interview 6 to 12 users on a one-to-one basis to see the patterns. That is more than enough for you to identify patterns. Based on your learnings and based on, like, let's say sort of whatever people have shared with you, you can refine your job story, you can refine your assumption, and you can organize your insights, right? 80% of the time that I see, like, let's say sort of people struggling with a problem statement is when they don't really know how to, like, ask questions or do user research. But I'll share with you 5 questions that you can, like, ask in any context, and that will help you, like, let's say sort of get to the real goal. Now, I'm sure, like, there are, as I said, this will work in 80% of the time, but not the other 20% of the time. So ask these 5 questions to get user research right. What's the hardest part about whatever is the context of the problem? What is the hardest part about choosing a fashion garment? What is the hardest part about, being on top of all the new openings in the PM space, right? Can you tell me about the last time that happened? It will give you a lot more detailed understanding of what the user was going through, what were their emotions. You ask them, why was that hard? Right? What, if anything, have you done to solve that problem today? And what don't you love about the solutions that you have already tried? Trust me, these 5 questions will do you more, benefit than the host of other 2,500 questions that you will come across on the internet, and they will get you to the real gold. Ask these 5 questions and to give you a contextual example, imagine you want to build Zomato for vegetarians, right? Don't ask what's the hardest part about finding a good vegetarian restaurant in a new city. You have already made it so niche, and you have already, limited the scope for gold for you to extract, like, the gold insight. Don't ask what is the hardest part about being a vegetarian, because you're attacking the personality of the user there. But ask what is the hardest part about eating out as a vegetarian, and then they will tell you what is it really, like, let's say sort of what do they really fear, or what are the struggles that they're going through, right? This question will certainly evoke some responses, which is like, the portions aren't large enough, let's say, or I don't really trust the things that I eat are meat free, or a search for vegetarian results like all American steak house with comments like, don't bring your vegetarian friends, just comes up on Google every time I do this. And that's the best part about interviews. Not only will they help you validate whether your customer has the problem that you thought about in the first place, they will also tell you that one that you have not thought about, and you win either ways. So it's very, very, like, let's just sort of note down these 5 questions, and like, you're good. All right. So after doing all of this, what you should be able to do is you should be able to come up with a user persona. Now, this user persona should have these 5 things available with you, right? What are their demographics? What is the scenario or the story that is, that they live in right now? What are their behaviors and what are their beliefs? What are their goals or needs? What are their frustrations? And what are their tasks? So if I have to talk about a user persona for, career accelerator program that we have, we can talk about, like, let's say sort of someone who is a business analyst at, like a Credit on Technologies. She's aged 34, 24, and is based in Bangalore. She's inspired by the product manager who works with at her current company, and she wants to see herself envision and drive solutions for customers from scratch. She wants to see, like analysis as a skill and add more to her kitty, right? She will look for an open role and a mentor internally, or seek a new organization to actually make it come alive. Now, what are her behavioral traits, right? She values cultural elements like inclusivity, mentoring, education policies, and these make or break the deal for her, right? She needs a constant reminder to be persistent about the process to actually ease through. These are some of the behavioral considerations. What are her goals? She needs one-on-one mentorship to get the best actionable advice. She needs to track her upskilling progress as and when she moves ahead in the process. These are some let's say sort of needs and goals that she has, right? She wants to get in touch with the alumni to and have one-on-one calls to get their feedback on the program, as well as the mentors that are the part of the program. Now, what are some frustrations? She had tried online classes before, but the practice and the lessons are lost too soon. Or let's say balancing work pressure and job hunting is very taxing, and she is afraid that she'll lose focus in just like handling so many different things and tackling adulting issues at the same time, right? She feels anxious before interviews, makes silly mistakes, leading to more self-doubt, and then it's a vicious cycle that continues on and on. But what are the tasks that she needs to get done to actually, let's say sort of go through the process? You write down the tasks, you write down the behaviors, you write down the goals, you write down frustrations. You have already empathized so well with the user that nobody else has. Know thy user, for they are not you. And this is really important, guys. Once you have done your user persona, we'll talk about the user journey, and I'll show you all of this in depth once we are going through the case study. But the project was essentially to share, the results of KYS in a very interesting manner, rather than just sharing it as a score, right? So what is the user journey of someone who's trying to share the results with somebody else, right? So the user will have a sharer, the actions that they're going to take, what are they going to interact with, what are they thinking, what are they feeling at this point, and based on these feelings, what are some opportunities that you have, right? We'll go through the details of each one of these things, but I wanted to just share with you that this gives you an emotional understanding of what is happening with the user at different points, and how can you alleviate their fears, as well as how can you make sure that their emotional peaks and highs are something that you record and something that you celebrate, right? After understanding the who comes the what. Now is when you will, that's a sort of, probably you would have a list of features in your mind that to get this job story, out there. Let's say you're a team of 3 people or 5 people, or you're an engineer, you're a designer, you're a PM and an analyst. 4 of you are working on, let's say sort of one single thing, or you are singularly, let's say sort of driving the project. Either ways, what you should do is you brainstorm a list of features and you collate the list, and then you prioritize this list. Now, this priority can be based on multiple factors, and there are different processes or ways of going about doing things. One is called the Moscow method, which is, you segregate things on must have, should have, could have, and won't have, or you add different scores to them, which is reach, impact, what confidence you have in, actually that, hey, this feature will do the job that we want to get done, and what is the effort required to build this particular feature out. Lastly, there is a Pareto principle 80-20 rule, which says that focus on the 20% of the functionality that will get you 80% of the results, right? So I wanted to just highlight how to do it. You start placing your features in this particular matrix, which is high value, high effort. And if it is low effort and it is high value, do it now. If it is high value, but it takes high effort, do it next. If it is low value and it's, let's say sort of low effort, consider doing it later or whenever there is time. And if it is if it is low value and high effort, don't do it at all. It's not the good use of your time. I have just, let's say sort of put out some of the ideas that I had thought of. while sharing, like let's say sort of KYS results. And those were some of the ideas that I had put together that, hey, share potential jobs I can get. That is, like let's say sort of something is high value and it's very low effort, right? Can we add appraised, help me get this job on LinkedIn? That is high value. It creates public value and it's very low effort, right? Testimonial from hiring managers of different companies. That is high value because at the end of the day, if the hiring manager is talking about the quality of the person, there is no other higher, metric that can tell you, qualitative metric that can tell you about the quality that is going on in the program altogether. Another way to think about this is the 80-20 rule. And what I have here is a red route matrix of TomTom.com. It's a navigational functionality provided in cars. And if you were to take all of the jobs that can be done using this particular tool, then you can place them in a matrix like this, where you have things like all of the people doing a particular job all of the time, which is they plan it out all of the time, right? All of the people doing most of the time is they add a favorite. But some of the people doing some of the time is changing map color. So you don't have to focus on that right now. You can focus on that later, right? Few of the people doing some of the time is they want to give voice commands, but that's not your most red route. So what is your red route? Planning a route, adding a favorite, finding an alternative route. You get these three things done, you have a prioritized list of features that you want to go ahead with, right? So whether you're starting on a new feature within a product, whether you're starting a new product, use red routes to help you prioritize what needs attention, what deserves your attention and time, not only from you, from your engineers, from your business partners, and everybody else in the company. All right. At this point, I just wanted to, share this comic with you. Most of the times, just to keep it on a light note, I visit xkcd.com. They have really good comics, and you just love going through them every now and then. They have a lot about design, UX, philosophy, psychology. Very interesting set of comics. Let's sort of they keep drawing. But all right. So we have covered, yes, I'll definitely share the URL. We have covered the why, we have covered the who, we have covered the what, and we'll cover the how now, right? On how, if we were to think about it, if you guys have ever used Slack, this is the user flow diagram for sending one notification on Slack. These are the number of checks and balances that are done to actually send one notification on Slack. This user flow helps not only you understand what is the information that I really need to understand to get something right, but your engineers and your designers to also understand that, hey, at any given point in time, am I missing something out? Have I taken care of all the cases that I need to? Are all edge cases taken care for? Is there something that I've not thought about? What will happen? How will the user enter this? How will the user exit this? What happens, let's say sort of if they have muted themselves or if they have put themselves on DND? What if somebody else has overridden that DND, right? So you categorize all of these things in a user flow and you try to build this with the help of your teammates, and you define what the how will look like. At this point, the second stage in how is once you have this user flow ready, you should be able to wireframe every single page on or every single step in this process. And Edric is a very, very solid designer. He has written a guide on smashingmagazine.com. And this is the title of the guide, Wireframing the Perfectionist Guide. It will help you understand what you really need to get wireframing right. So it tells you about what do you need before you start wireframing, what are common mistakes that people make while wireframing, and how to deliver wireframes and how to get feedback on wireframes. Because most of the times you're stuck in, let's say sort of feedback loops. But if you can, get probably 20 years of learning in one single article on wireframing, then this is it. It is worth 30 minutes of your time. To give you an example, what wireframe sketches look like and how you can, let's just sort of go about doing this. This is my wireframe on KYS sharing. What would it look like? Obviously, this project is not out there live. So all of these are, let's just sort of just WIP processes and statuses that I'm sharing with you. But if you were to share KYS results on a mobile screen, here is how my wireframes, work out, right? And in these wireframes, what I try to do is I also try to add a lot more detailed interactions as to why I think, why have I put this here? What is my hypothesis? What will happen when I click here? What will, let's just sort of happen when I tap and hold? What are the kind of pictures that people will read? Will something open in a new tab? Will something just remain in the same tab? Will it expand? I don't do all of these things on the visual design state because it's a little too late to make changes. And it's, you have to do a lot of to and fro's there. It's very easy to do all of this on the wireframing stage and get feedback. Right. Finally, you do the visual design and, let's just sort of, you set this up and we build this landing page for KYS, which talks about the test, which talks about, let's just sort of how you can identify your strengths, who is it for, what is the structure of the test. Once this visual design is ready, let's just sort of on visual design, I wanted to just share a few pointers, but the how and each steps in this how, which is the user flow, which is, wireframing, which is interactions, and which are visual design, they are in depth, topics on their own, which we can probably talk about for 2 more hours in every single class. But I will skip, let's just sort of, that is not the scope of this session. So I'll, let's just sort of skip. But on visual design, I wanted to share a few, let's just sort of words of wisdom. Because I see that in design, it is very easy to give feedback on visual design, right? Because that's the thing that you see the most. But what is good visual design? It is a balance of both form and content, right? Paul Rand is considered, let's say the father of graphic design, and he has designed some really crazy, momentous logos like IBM, Morningstar, and a lot of other, he has written a lot of books about graphic design themselves. So what he says is a work of art is realized when form and content are indistinguishable, when they fuse, when they are in synthesis, right? If the form predominates, meaning is blunted. When content predominates, interest lags. What it means is that if you over design something, the content or the meaning that you wanted to, let's say sort of share in the first place, that is not taken away. But if the content predominate, it becomes boring, let's say sort of very easy. To give you an example of this, let's say if you were looking at, regional video game sales divided by genres from 1980 to 2020, 40 years, what are the kind of sales that have happened across different regions and across different genres? Now, it's very difficult to comprehend what is really going on here. There's a lot of content, but your interest won't be similar, right? But if I present the same content in a chart, you can now start questioning that, hey, why is North America playing so many action games, right? Or compared to the European Union, or shooter games, right? Why are racing games not so popular in North America compared to the European Union? All these questions start to come up the moment you put content and, let's say sort of you balance it with form. But if you were, if the content is not so dense, then a smaller, let's say sort of version of the table does the job altogether. If it is not broken down by different, let's say sort of regions, maybe a table is the best way to present the data that you wanted to present, right? So in visual design, it is very, very important to get form and content right. One of, let's say sort of I would love for you to read, let's say sort of this article by Sarah Leo on, and she's like, data visualization journalist at The Economist. And she talks about some of the mistakes that they have drawn over time in data visualization. And what are the kind of, like, let's say, sort of inferences that people had made because of the kind of, balance of form and content that they had. Lastly, there is one more article that I would love for you to read, which is The Obvious, the Easy, and the Possible. It is written by Jason Fried. He's one of the co-founders of Basecamp. Another co-founder is DHH, who founded Ruby on Rails. Basecamp is a product that I really look up to, and Jason Fried usually shares a lot of wisdom. What he says in this particular article is that whenever you are designing an interface, or whenever you're trying to, like, let's say, sort of develop a product, the most of, the tension comes between trying to balance the obvious, the easy, and the possible. Most people will say that, hey, this should be available on the first screen, or this should be on top, or this should, like, it should be like, I can't do this particular action from this particular screen, right? But not everything needs to be obvious, because if everything is obvious, nothing is obvious. Some things should just be possible. And how should they be possible is by hiding them under kebab menus, under, like, let's say, sort of different scrolls, or so on and so forth. So the balance that we maintain is by asking ourselves, is this the most obvious action that a user should be able to take on this particular screen? How easy should this action be? Should it be obvious? Should it be just possible? And if you're able to put all of your features or the actions that you want the user to take in this spectrum, you will be able to have a much better feedback session with your stakeholders, with your engineers, with all of your, design partners. Having said that, after you, like, let's just sort of have done all of these exercises, your prototype is ready, and now it is ready to, like, let's just sort of test with users. I just wanted to share another, nugget of wisdom on prototypes, and that is, you remember this diagram that I had, like, let's say, sort of shown earlier. Each layer is a prototype of the layer below it. What I mean by this is, if you make a roadmap or a scope of things that you want to build, that is a prototype of your strategy. Once you have done that and your strategy didn't work out, then, you need a change in your strategy. So every single layer is a prototype of the layer below it. From your roadmap, you will build a particular structure. And if that structure doesn't work out, but your roadmap, like, let's say, you have confidence that your roadmap or your scope is all right, then you need to change your structure. So if you think of each of these different layers as a prototype, you will, like, let's say, sort of, you will do yourself good, because prototype is all about learning and not nailing in one shot. You can learn that your surface is not working. You can learn that your structure is not working, or you can learn that your strategy is not working. And you can, like, let's just sort of use all the different lessons that you have learned from your prototypes and from real data in your prototypes. And you can, like, let's just sort of make the next prototype much, much, much better, right? I wanted to talk about testing, and I wanted to, like, let's just sort of just give you an understanding of what are the different methods that are there to test. And what is the landscape of user research methods altogether. If you put them on, like a graph of qualitative versus quantitative and attitudinal versus behavioral, there are lots of research methods that, that are there. The credit for this particular diagram goes to nngroup.com. And what you shall take away from this is that use qualitative methods to generate hypothesis. Talk to users, interview users, do focus groups, participatory design, right? Do all of this to get and generate hypothesis, even surveys, right? But use quantitative methods to validate or invalidate them. Now, what are quantitative methods? You get, like, let's say, sort of clickstream analytics, or you get A/B testing. All of those are ways to validate or invalidate your hypothesis. Now, the attitudinal methods will help you understand what your users really want to do. But the behavioral methods will tell you what they actually truly do, and which is going to be always different from the attitude. The attitude is you want to become healthy and you want to, like, stay fit. but the behavior is you don't get up and, like exercise routinely, regularly on a day-to-day basis. So your attitudes and your behaviors can vary drastically. So you need to measure your wants as well as the actual behaviors that your users are, like showcasing. Now, I won't go into the depth of like, let's say each one of these research methods, but I wanted to give you a landscape of what the world of testing looks like and what can you do. But to begin with, the most commonly used, like, let's say testing methods can be bucketed into three things, which is usability tests. You can, like, let's say sort of create a prototype and you can self-test that whether things are usable or not. You can test it with your colleagues. You can test it with your friends. That is where usability testing stops. You can do user tests. You can have a focus group, like get 5 or 6 people on a WhatsApp, group with you, and you can share early beta versions with them. You can share wireframes with them. You can get early feedback. You can take your prototype to fields where, like, let's say they are supposed to be used. So let's say, for example, you were the PM for the sound box of, PhonePe or Paytm, and you had built a prototype and you're now taking it to one of, like, let's say sort of the stores in your neighborhood, and you ask them that whenever someone pays by UPI, there is a sound that comes in and says that, hey, you have received a Paytm payment of XYZ rupees. That builds brand recall, that gives, like, let's say sort of an understanding of what do you see, like they are not double checking whether they received the money, yes or no, on their phones. They're not anxious anymore. So that's a prototype that you can do and that you can test in your field studies. You can do interviews, right? You can talk to them. And there are a lot of tracking tools like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Amplitude, Hotjar that you can use to like actually do behavioral analysis of what people are doing with your product. Eye tracking is used in behavioral research. Yes, Sarthak, but it's usually very expensive and, like, let's say sort of for the privileged. But there are, like, let's say sort of other tools. I'm forgetting the name of one, but what that uses, what they show you is how would an AI, if they were to emulate a human, what would the eye movement on the page look like for your landing page or for your, web pages. I'll just try to figure out what the name of that particular tool was. But yeah, these are the most common methods. Now I want you to understand that, very similar to Maslow's law of hierarchy, where, like, let's say humans have different level of needs. There is a Maslow law of, design needs or design hierarchy. Don't try to solve for proficiency if you have not solved for reliability or functionality yet. So ask yourself, does it work? Yes, no, good, great. Functionality is done. Does it work when I need it to? Can I figure out how to make it work? Can it show me how to make it work better? And how else can this work for me? Now, to give you an example, I'll just put ChatGPT through this spectrum. Does ChatGPT work? Yes. Does it work when I need it to? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's not very reliable. It keeps crashing. In, like, let's say sort of, it may not give you most of the results that you want. Can I figure out how to make it work? Yes, it's very simple to use. You just need to give prompts and, like, let's say sort of course correct, very usable, right? Can it show me how to make it work better? Right now, ChatGPT does not do that. If it told you that, hey, you can ask me XYZ prompts after you have given it a prompt to make the answer a lot more better, then the tool itself is making you proficient with it, right? So it is not proficiency level design yet. But what else can it work? How else can this work for me? You can write letters. You can, like, let's say sort of write PRDs. You can write, business use cases. You can write surveys. You can write code. You can do a lot of things. So it is creative. So this is the master law of hierarchy, and try to make sure that for any product or any service that you're trying to design, you go bottom up, not, like, let's say sort of top down. At this point, the understanding is to repeat. And what I mean by repeat is that several quick design iterations are better than fewer longer ones, right? What are you going to repeat? Why, who, what, how? In that particular order, test and repeat. That is it. right? That is the major takeaway from like, let's say sort of this exercise. And you remember this diagram that I showed in the beginning, that is it, right? Like you have ideas, you prototype, you make it tangible, you test, you get feedback, and you repeat. That is the process of going through, like let's say user experience design. I wanted to quickly walk you through a case study that I'd been working on, or like let's say a project that I'd been working on. I won't take a lot of your time. I know like let's say sort of we are way over time, but I hope this gives you a solid understanding of what is it like to practice UX design, right? So let's say the problem statement that we started was with, how do we help people share KYS results, right? And the problems today I tried to articulate was that, hey, as of today, sharing KYS results is done by capturing screenshots. Candidates with average KYS results might not be motivated to share it, right? The receiver of the KYS results might not be aware and might not trust the results on first impression, right? And some like let's say sort of technical problems, which may be to make KYS test shareable, we might need to openly host the same. Now, this causes some privacy or personal issues, right? To do this, I started understanding the users and I started breaking down the candidate who is sharing the like results. Now you can bucket them into multiple categories: users with excellent results, users with decent results, users with subpar results. So we prioritized, like let's say sort of sharing for users with excellent results, and then we would see how it's functioning and then come back to like let's say sort of others, right? Then on the other hand, the user group is someone who is receiving the results. So what are going to be the personas of these, or like let's say segments of these users, right? Users who are aware and have taken the KYS test already. If the receiver is someone who has already taken the test, that's one group, right? Users who are aware, but they have not taken the test. That is the second like group. Third group is people who are unaware about the test altogether. And fourth group is someone who has gone through the CAP program themselves. Now, based on these different buckets, I started, like let's say sort of writing jobs to be done, and I started writing design goals, right? What are the jobs to be done for a sharer, right? When I'm unhappy with my results, I want to share my KYS results with very close friends or mentors only, so that I can reflect and come to term with my results. When I have come to term with my results, I want to share my KYS results with peers and mentors so that they can give me feedback and tell me how can I get better, right? When I'm happy with my results, I want to share my results so that I can establish myself as a credible authority in this field or doctrine. And when I'm uncomfortable with someone looking at my results, I want to easily control the publicity so that I have control over who has access to it. Now, these are some jobs to be done for a sharer. For a receiver, when I read through the results, I want to get an understanding of the sharer's strengths so that I can evaluate if they fit my candidature. Right? When I read through the results, I want to get an understanding of the sharer's current gaps so that I can help them improve. And when I'm intrigued enough, I want to get an easy way of getting to the test so that I can take the test for myself. These are some jobs to be done that like entail this particular case study of sharing KYS results. Now from here on, I started doing a little bit of understanding of what is the current experience like, what are people doing, and then we started going through a rigorous exercise on detailing out the user journey, detailing out ideas, what can be done. So I'll just give you like a quick overview. I won't take a lot of your time, but if you were to think about the user journey, the actions that the users take are, they navigate to the user, to the results, they share the results, and they await feedback. These are the three actions that a sharer can take. Now, what are the touch points? Their profile in their app. Whenever they click share, they will go to, like let's say sort of some native experiences like probably WhatsApp or something else. And finally, they have, like let's say sort of the touch point is the shared result themselves. Now, what are the thoughts that they're going through while they're doing these exercises, right? I am going to boast about my results to everyone I know. This is a probable thought. I hope my friends and colleagues don't look down on me. That is another probable thought. I hope I'm not fired after my manager knows where I truly stand. This is also a thought that may come in. Now, what are the feelings that a user is going through at this point. Either they are cheerful, or they are unamused, or like they're really anxious and scared. Now, depending on these feelings, what can I do? What is the opportunity? I should motivate users to own the results that they have, right? I can ease the sharing by removing, like, let's say sort of, app as a dependency. And I can remove absolute numbers to ease the anxiety. These are some opportunities, these are hypotheses, these are ideas that I have, and like, let's just sort of I've put together. Now, everything like about this user journey, similar to the receiver and similar to, like, let's say sort of, there are many things that we will go through. But having done all of this, now it was the time to ideate and, like, let's just sort of think about how can we really make KYS sharing, like, let's say sort of an easier thing to do. So let's say this could be one of the outputs of a KYS result, right? Hema's product sense makes her a customer experience guru. She's super skilled at understanding motivation and coming up with insightful ideas. Now, this is much better than looking at something like this. But this gives you a much detailed understanding of where their strengths lie, what is the average strength, what are their strengths, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of study that has been conducted into understanding, okay, what could be the accompanying, WhatsApp messages, Telegram messages. How do we go about boosting credibility? Because for the receiver, credibility is a very, very, very important thing to understand. So what are the different types of credibilities? How, and how do these affect the understanding of the results altogether, right? Now, at this point, we went on to, like, let's say sort of, we went on a little different part to understand why do people share things in the first place? What makes them share, right? So there is a book called Contagious, and what are the principles, like, let's say sort of, that make things, products, or trends catchy. So then I started studying about what are, each one of these different things, and, like, let's say sort of social currency, stories, triggers, emotions, public and practical value, right? In each one of these things, I tried to understand how can we leverage stories as appraised. And these are some of the ideas that I've written down. Now, from each one of these ideas, we started, like, let's say sort of putting them in different buckets of what is high value, high effort, what is low value, low effort. From this exercise, we started going to wireframes and we started writing down what life might really look like. Because all of this is still, like, let's say sort of pretty much in words, there is no visual, like, articulation of it. Once wireframes were ready, as like, I started doing a little bit of mood board of what the visual design could look like or could shape like. So all of these are things that I like, and like, let's say sort of, I've seen in the past, I have interacted with. This was the mood board, and we started, like, let's say sort of then creating different visual identities for this. So let's say, for example, you gave the KYS test, and at the end of your KYS test, you get a WhatsApp message saying that, hey, if Vision from Marvel rated your skill graph as a product manager, he would say that they are terribly well balanced, right? So it's a little more funny, it's a little more contextual, it drives a lot more emotion than just having a look at and saying that, hey, your communication skills are 7 out of 10, right? So to do this, there were a lot of, like, let's say sort of other ideas that we had come across, that, hey, if product management were a game of poker, you and Tony Stark would have the same favorite hand. If you and Iron Man were put together under a microscope, you would be isotopes of a product manager, blah, blah, blah. All of these random ideas. I mean, this is work in progress. This is not, like, let's say live, but I wanted to share with you how do you really design for good UX? And, like, let's say sort of, this is where I would love to just close the case study. I would have loved to go in depth, but we are way over time. At this point, I want to summarize, like, let's say sort of our learnings. Let's say you have website visitors. Most of the ways that we go about doing this is that, you have some leads, we spam the fuck out of them, and then you have some customers that still love you, and they generate the dollars for you, right? Another way of looking at this funnel is, if you flip it, you love your customers, they will lead their friends to you, their friends want some loving too, and some try you out, some don't, right? Experiences when customers love your experience, they go through an emotion. Uh, when emotions arise, some tend to explode, right? What happens when something explodes? The proximity is affected. And what I call, what I like to call the blast radius. And in this case, it's a very, 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 sorry, this was, I think I was on the other, like, let's say sort of slide. So here's the funnel that I'm talking about, right? Here's another way to look at the same funnel. You love your customers, they lead their friends to you, and they want some loving too, right? And then an explosion happens. Lastly, to summarize it all, user experience design is design of anything that is independent of medium or across medium, with human experience as an explicit outcome and human engagement as the explicit goal, right? Experience can be observed, it's emotional, it's unique to a user. I really want to, like, let's just sort of make sure you understand that as designers, all we can do is, designers, PMs, engineers, all of us are product builders at the end of it, right? All we can do is design services or interfaces for the users to interact with. But they will have an experience with it, which will never be yours. That experience is very truly personal to the user. And I want to focus on the word personal, right? Now, having said all of this, I have another take-home assignment for you, which is I need you to design an explanation of UX for a 10-year-old kid and test it out with your neighborhood kid, right? A lot of websites have shaped my understanding of, like, let's say what UX is, what design is, and, like, let's say sort of what impact design can have on day-to-day lives. Here are some of, like, let's say sort of the resources that I would love for you to see and be inspired by. Please take a note of all of these and, like, let's say sort of be inspired, design great products, design great experiences. That is about it for today. I'll shut up now.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Before we move forward to the Q&A session, I would love to hear from the audience, their thoughts on today's presentation. For the same, I'll quickly run a poll. You can rate the session between 1 to 5, 5 being the highest.
I also want to take 2 minutes till everyone gives us feedback on how the session was. Ravi spoke a lot about the KYS test. I just want to take 30 more seconds to talk about the KYS test. As Ravi already mentioned, this is a test that helps you evaluate yourself on the 6 core skills that a product manager should have. By taking this test, if you're an aspiring PM, you will get to know about your strengths, your blind spots, and you will be able to customize a plan that works for you in order to upskill and get that product management role that you're dreaming of getting. If you're already working as a product manager, this test will help you evaluate your skill set and will be able to help you course correct your career path based on the gaps that you have so that you can work on your skill set. So I just have one request. I would request everyone to go give this KIS test a shot. This test does not require any kind of preparation. It is a very short 30 to 50-minute test based on how you answer the questions. It will be very insightful. We are very sure of it. And we'd love to hear more about this. We'd love to hear feedback from you all about the test. So if you've not taken the test, we would love for you to take the test. We'll put the link to the test on the chat. Just spare out 30 minutes wherever you have the time and do take the test. Okay, we'll open the floor for question and answers. So if you have questions, feel free to put them on the chat, raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can ask your questions as well. There were a few questions in the chat, Ravi. I'll just read them out as I find them.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, nothing related to these are all general questions about the recordings. Guys, the recordings are available on, they will be available on YouTube. You guys can refer to this session whenever you want to later on. Anyone has any questions? Hey, Ravi, I'm struggling with writing the perfect unbiased user stories in my company as a newly joined APM. Do suggest some helpful resources, examples to sharpen it.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? What do you mean by?
Sarthak, do you want to? I will just, yeah, here, Sarthak. I'm just unmuting you.
Yeah. So by unbiased, I mean, most of my user stories would be something like they get inspired by the design of whatever is existing in the current product or from a competitor product. And then I end up writing something that is a functionality, it's not really coming from the job to be done or not even the problem that the user is facing. It's more like, I want to see a table, that is where it ends up going. Yeah, I just don't have enough references or data to see what are good user stories look like.
You can read on Jobs to be Done by Intercom. They have a very solid blog on this. I'll try to let's say sort of share the link on LinkedIn post where let's say the event is also being recorded. So on that blog post, they share a lot of examples of how to write job stories and how to not be solution biased in your job stories. I think that should help you get inspired and course correct as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Guys, feel free to raise your hands. I will unmute you. You guys can ask your questions. There's something on the chat, Ravi.
Yes. Piyush, the duration is 16 weeks. Can you share the program link? Yes.
Janita has a question. Janita, I will just ask you to unmute yourself. You can ask the question here.
Hi, Janita.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to start a project, but I don't know how to start it, whether it should be an existing app. For now, I have choose Zara app. It has actually many flaws in it, so I thought I could just upgrade it and put it in my portfolio, or should I try something else? I am not sure what I should do to get a job.
I mean, if it's an app that is already working and getting the job done, you should, try to make sure that you fix it first, because it's very time consuming and effortful to build something new out of the box, right? But if you think that, let's say sort of there is a lot of legacy that you have to carry because of the old app and it is not really repairable, charting out on a new journey would make sense. But may I know what this app is about, or was it what it is for?
The Zara is actually a clothing brand, but its user experience is very bad. No one could actually purchase something from that.
Okay.
Only the landing page looks attractive, but it's not functionable.
All right. I think that's a little broad, but if you can connect with me on LinkedIn and you can share your query, maybe I can help you in depth better.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Can you share your LinkedIn ID?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question. How do we persuade management to invest in user research? Interesting question.
All right. I think this is a question that, let's say sort of really talks a little bit about the personality of the management in the first place. Are they trying to, like, let's say sort of, so how I think about it is there are usually three types of organizations. One where the founder is the PM, and, like, let's say sort of they have ideas which they want to validate. They have their brainchilds and that they want to execute. And usually in these, like, let's say sort of setups, they are not willing to listen to, like, let's say user research or the insights from user research. My suggestion would be to either try to educate them via different design reports, or like take on a secret project, drive it, show the results, and then like, let's just sort of take it forward. But sometimes, even after having looked at those results, people take it onto their ego, and they like they tend not to go, they don't mend their ways. In such scenarios, you usually have, like, let's say sort of the second type of a company where the customer is the PM. And this is very, now this is a place where whatever the customer says, the company builds. While this is a very good thing to do, but most cases, the problems with such a place is that, like, there are toxic customers, and you never tend to fire toxic customers. And in the third type of company, no one is the PM, right? In this, like, everyone is making decisions on their own, and there is no vision or like a strategic game or a game plan in the first place. Now, in all of these three different companies, you will have different, like, let's say, pitches to your management to invest in user research, right? And you'll need to understand what is the friction that they have right now, which is, holding them back from actually investing there or taking that time off. So it requires a little bit more digging to do that pitch. But once you identify the category of the company that you are in and the kind of management that you have, you should be able to chart out a path from there. I hope that, like, let's sort of make sense.
Hiten, I will unmute you so that if you have any further questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Ravi. It was helpful, but I think I need to still work on how my management on the management style, because the company that I'm working currently, the founders kind of decide on what we should be building next, and my role was kind of limited to like more on the delivery side, like getting the feature delivered to production, not doing any research, or I kind of feel like I'm only doing a, engineering manager or some kind of a job where I work closely with the dev team to get the feature delivered.
So, usually, like, let's say sort of, I refer to such teams as feature factories, right? Where you have there is a list of features in your roadmap, and all you're doing is, like, let's say, executing on and on and on without taking a break, without trying to understand what is really going on. These are tier 2 product cultures. And what I would request you to do is tell them, like, or help them understand what product management is really about. It's not about execution. It's about learning, building, measuring, learning, and then building, right? I think Marty Kagan has a very, very good video or a podcast on this with Lenny, where he talks about, like, let's say sort of the essentials of product management. And they have like an hour and a half long discussion on this. I hope you go through that conversation, and you can share that conversation with, like, let's say, your management as well. If they, the Marty shares like some advice on how can you, like, let's say sort of help transition the company's culture, probably, let's say, for a quarter, and see if that works. And if it works out, and if they, like, let's say sort of agree to take it as an experiment, it works, it's great, then, you're on the right path. But if it doesn't work out after a quarter, or like, let's say sort of 4-5 months, the right thing to do would be to, like, let's say sort of find yourself in a better company where you're actually doing problem identification and solving rather than feature building.
Hey, I hope that answers your question. Anjani has raised her hand. Anjani, I will just unmute you. Give me a second. Here you go.
Hi. So I'm a student and I'm currently studying graphic design and visual communication. So I'm trying to step into the field of UX as well simultaneously, but I don't really have a uh, in college resource for this. Like I don't have a faculty for this, so I'm trying to learn everything on my own. So I have a set of projects that I did, but I don't know how to check the credibility of them, or like how, or if the product that I created is actually capable of implementation.
Mhm.
So for like understanding the real life scope of the product, are there any resources or something I can reach out to know if anything that I'm doing is actually right?
Sure, I think that's a very good question. In these scenarios, it's very important to have an engineer friend who can walk you through, like, let's say, sort of, who can do that feasibility check for you, right? If, let's say, you are unable to, have or connect to someone in your close vicinity right now, you can meet one either on Lunch Club or adplist.org. These are two websites that help you connect with, like, let's say, sort of people of different kinds all over the internet. I've learned a lot from myself by engaging with a lot of people on these websites, how they tackle, different problem statements, how, like, let's say, sort of, how does, let's say, a senior interaction designer at Apple go about, solving problems, or how does an engineering manager at Atlassian, help motivate the team to do whatever they do. It's very easy to connect with such people and just exchange ideas and, like, be a brainstorm with them. So I would request you to try out these websites if you are not able to get that personal connect near you today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I also have another one. So
Yeah.
I'm also trying to get placed right now. And what are the ground level expectations that an organization or a studio might expect from a student?
Right. Um, for most parts, today, like, let's say, sort of, in the economy that we live in today, which is post-pandemic, and, like, let's say, sort of, you are seeing a lot of tech jobs that have been slashed, right? Um, there are three key things that, like, let's say, organizations look forward to. One is a solid understanding of the doctrine yourself, which is where, like, let's say, you have spent a lot of time, building opinions and, like, let's say, a um, thorough understanding in your own mind whether, like, let's say, you want to proceed with graphic design, you want to proceed with UX, or what are the elements of each one of these different careers pulled together. First is that. Second is execution capability, right? And they will see your portfolios, projects, your, like, let's say, sort of, because at the end of the day, as I said, companies hire to get the job done, right? Like, and that should be visible from your portfolios. So if you have a solid portfolio that gives them an understanding of that, hey, you can come and execute from day zero, that's great. Third is, like, let's say, whether or not in today's market, especially, are you aligned with the problem statement that, the company is set out to solve? Because at the end of the day, if you don't really, want, or you don't love the problem statement, it's very easy for like, let's say, sort of, you to quiet quit, or just stand back and, like, watch the rest of the people do whatever they do without paying, like, let's say, sort of, a lot of attention or being available most of the time. So these are the three, like, let's say, sort of, key expectations that companies have today. One is, your craft. Second is, like, let's say, sort of, you can execute. And third is, you're clearly motivated and you care about the problem statement, right? If you can check these things off, you are well, like, let's say, sort of, more than good to go in 80 to 90% of the open vacancies that are out there.
Okay, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Guys, I will have to put a hard stop. Unfortunately, we're already past, like, we were supposed to end this session at 1, but I'm so glad all of you could stay back. While you guys are leaving, I'll just run one last poll about the KISS test. Yeah, again, as I mentioned, do try the KISS test. We'd love to hear feedback on whether you like the experience of taking the KISS test or not. I'm sure Ravi would love to hear your experience and all the efforts that he's put behind the scenes to create this. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's session. We will keep seeing you on other sessions that we have.